Well, good morning. Here we are on Mountain View Drive in the Fourth Lake District of Lake Luzerne. We are at the home of Barbara Carr. Of course, you call her Barbara Carr when you know her well. Her real name is Barbara Automobile, but we know her well enough to call her Barbara Carr. And so we want to thank you, Barbara, for inviting us into your home to talk about your experience here, which has been quite a long experience. You have been coming to your cottage here for how long? Do you know the number of years?
Well, yes, I do. Actually, I've been coming to this location. My mother had relatives who owned the house next door all my life. So I have pictures as a very little baby. But my father bought this house in 1941. So I have spent every summer here since then. That's a lifetime, actually,
Yeah.
and it's been an enjoyable one.
Sure.
There have been periods of time when I wasn't here, but for the most part, I've spent my entire life here in the summer.
And that's over 70 years if you do some quick math.
Well, I was born in 1932. Why don't I let the viewers do the math?
That's right. Well, we'll do. Now, as far as the whole community goes, there are about 60 cottages in what you'd call the Fourth Lake community.
Right.
Is that right?
It's our Fourth Lake Community Association, but we stress the word community. Mm-hmm. Many families, I can't say the majority, but many families have been coming as long as I have, or longer. Mm-hmm. But there are still people in those families here, plus many more who've come through the years as they would come to visit someone, like it, and actually more than like it, fall in love with it very quickly, and purchase or build. In the case now,
right.
There are more people building. But
is that right? More people building?
There are a few. There's not a lot of land available in what we call our confines of our association. We do have a geographic limitation on that, but there are still some places or people are raising the former homes,
Sure.
which were really camps, and building lovely homes today with air, and can you come up in the winter to ski.
Oh,
and
sure.
So
sure.
it grows really, and the families come back generation after generation. In my case, except that I don't have any children, but I have family members who come.
That's great.
And probably will take over at some point from me.
Sure. You see that up in the Luzerne Heights too. You see old camps being taken down and new homes being built. So it's a pattern in the area, maybe even in the larger world around us too.
I think it is, particularly around water, a lake, a river, that's very, very enviable to be on the water today. And there aren't too many of us who are on the water, but we have our own beach. Yeah. So we really have the best of all worlds, except that we are not all actually waterfront properties.
Right.
Everyone owns their own property, but we have the community property with the beach and a community building where many, many activities are held. So
still to this day, the community building is used?
Yes, except for this past year, of course, or a year and a half now. But up until then, yes, there are all kinds of events, lectures, concerts, other presentations, square dancing, folk dancing. It's just an area for children to have games and play in there. So
and then now the dancing and the lectures, that has a long tradition in this community, right? You talked about that happening when you were a child.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yes, I lived here with my aunt and uncle. Actually, they were grand aunt and uncle during the week, because one thing differently about me in this community growing up in the 1940s, we lived in Cohoes, which is near Albany, so it was only 50 miles away. Most of the families here were from Brooklyn or other places down in the city area. So, and their parents were school teachers, my friends' parents were school teachers. So they would be here for the summer. So I was able to stay here with my granddad and uncle, who treated me very, very well. I just came back to eat and sleep, and for the most part was out all day
Right.
at the lake or doing something else.
That's great.
So we had quite a group of people growing up together.
Yeah.
But I was a little bit more unique in that I was so close to home. Yeah. Actually, one of my friends said one day when we were about 11 or 12, remembering now that they came from Brooklyn and then they lived here in the summer, and he said, "Barbara, in Cohoes, do you have streets?" And then I realized, and I said, "Well, of course. What do you mean? Of course we have streets." But I realized later on that he only knew, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and this, where we walked on the highway.
That's right.
And he didn't understand what could be in Cohoes.
Right.
So I've always remembered that.
That's
And
funny.
I used to tease him when he was still here. Actually, his daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter come now too. So
I was going to ask you about that. If there are the grandchildren of families who were coming, now the grandchildren are here, so you've got real continuity in this community.
it's gone to great-grandchildren, many people, yes.
That's remarkable.
Yes.
Actually.
Yes, because I've talked to people home about having this place. They'll say, "You still have that place?"
Yeah.
They call it a camp. I don't call it a camp because it's kind of a good 3-season home now, but
Right.
and some are year-round homes. But I said, "Oh yes," and they said, "Well, we had a place, but I sold it because the children weren't interested."
Right.
But
Yeah.
these kids here tend to grow up almost like become sisters and brothers or
Isn't that nice?
relatives, and
Isn't that
carry
something?
on their communication and their lives right into adulthood. That's the case with my next door neighbors and several others.
Well, I was going to ask you about the original family. I think you may know who they were. The first cottage
in our
people.
community?
Yep.
Yes. The family that came, that we celebrated a few years ago, we celebrated what we said was 100 summers. It wasn't 100 years, but it was traced back to 1915 when the earliest member of what became our community association was unstructured at that time.
Right.
But the family was related to the father of Doris Schlitt, who became our president for a number of years. We've had other wonderful presidents, but Doris was quite a number of years. And it was her dad in 1915 who drove the family up and stayed, and then other people they knew. So we celebrated from 1915 as kind of the original but unofficial birth of the Fourth Lake community.
Right, and is that her cottage on Ivy Lane? Is that,
Yes,
Right.
and her daughter comes now.
Right.
And
We used to deliver the meal there.
oh, right.
Yeah.
To Doris and Irving.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So I do mention those names. I'm not going to go into a lot of family names.
No, but right. But that's remarkable.
but
1915.
It does. They did trace back to her dad being probably the first that we could. And then there are another one or two families that came around right after that or around that same time.
Sure. Well, that's just remarkable.
My mother's relatives came probably in the 1920s.
All right.
And
So
that's
soon
what
after.
brought us.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a direct connection to me.
Right. Now, you mentioned, or did you mention the common occupation of most of the summer folks, most of the residents?
Well, not now. I mean,
Right, but I mean then.
in today's world, there's a great diversity of positions in professional areas. But back again, in those earlier days, it was primarily a lot of school teachers.
School teachers.
Both husbands and wives were teachers, so
Right.
that's what enabled them to come for the summer.
Now, this might be sort of an unusual question, but how did the fact that they were teachers affect the atmosphere or the life of the community? Is there some way to quantify that? Or
Well, I think education, educational pursuits or functions were developed. That There was a day camp. There had been a day camp, which was run strictly voluntary, to take nature walks. Somebody was a biology teacher, and plays put on, musicals, concerts. We had concerts in the 1940s. So I would say cultural, educational things were definitely fostered, which it could be it was a direct link from what you're saying about people being educators.
Right.
So, but, you know, we all, you know, did a number of things as kids. And that's why I say, you know, I can tell you more about, you know, my life.
Right, absolutely. So, so you talked about how your family came to be here. You told us about that. Now, where were your folks from, and what did they do?
My parents were both from Cohoes, which is, you know, it's a suburb of Albany, New York. And my dad was a musician and an automobile salesman. He had an automobile agency in Troy for Hudson's.
Right.
And which is a name that people of today wouldn't know unless they're of a certain age.
Right.
And my mother was an accountant for a newspaper, the Troy Record it was called. It was a local Troy newspaper, which is still functioning, but it's part of a conglomerate now.
Right.
That has a lot of smaller city newspapers attached to it.
At that time, it was an independent paper at that time.
Yes, very well run, and she worked for them for many years.
Now, were there regular association meetings, like a weekly, monthly, or back in the day, or even now?
You know, this association, as in Forest Lake Association, has been in existence since the late 1940s, very late, almost into the 50s. So it's grown and developed and has become, you know, more sophisticated and, you know, with property today and all kinds of things that are take a lot of time. There are 2 meetings a year.
Oh, okay.
But there's a president and board of directors who function across the year of necessity. But 2 meetings a year.
2 meetings a year.
A lot of conversations on the beach and things like that. Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, you know, so we used to try here when I was young in high school to get people to take us into the movies at night. I found a picture of Bird's Theater.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
You know, we always had to negotiate with some parent to take us into the movie because it just was, you know, too far you couldn't walk 3 miles in the dark.
Yeah.
So, but things like that. But other than that, we did hiking, always the lake, and horseback riding.
Yeah. Great.
Some of us played golf later on as high school people.
Sure.
So, but there was always so much to do here.
Right.
And we just kind of did it on our own, actually. You know, we weren't really supervised, and I guess we're good enough that we didn't really need too much overlooking.
Here you are. You made it.
We made it.
Oh.
And it's just such a beautiful place. It's, you know, people use the term my special place, and
Right.
it's really revered by those of us who have continued to come through our lives.
Sure. Yeah. Now, did your dad play music here?
Well, we had concerts at one point, and he would participate in that. But he also was good with the banjo at campfires or hot dog roasts.
Okay.
Yeah. But in later years, not so much. As he got older, he wasn't into it quite so much, except at home. But he had his own orchestra earlier in his life.
Yeah. What kind of music did they play? That orchestra? Do you know was it classical music or Benny Goodman style or?
He had an orchestra up at the Hague on Lake George at one of the large hotels up there. But it was at the time when people would come up from New York City, stay for the summer, and they had music through the dinner hour. It was formal.
Okay.
And then for dancing after.
Okay.
And people didn't have cars, and they were up there, so all the activity took place there. So
Right.
it was mostly dance music and dinner music.
Isn't that nice? Is that building still functioning, or?
The name, the Trout House, is still functioning, but it's not that building. It burned down.
Oh,
It was
okay.
one of those hotels with a big porch with all the rockers that
Oh,
overlook.
sure.
It's way up almost to Ticonderoga.
Oh, okay.
Hague.
Right, sure. Right. Well, you talked about social events, like at the meeting house, so to speak.
Community.
There would be square dancing. There would be speakers would come in, folk dancing, music. So.
Yeah, we've always had quite a lineup and activities. Mostly either the people here or friends who would come up to visit them who had some area of expertise, might want to talk or play. We have a lot of musicians here and
Okay.
people who have their professions allow or provide that they are, able to give lectures. And
Sure. And that still happens to this day.
yes, it does.
That's great.
There's a thread here. There's a thread that runs through
Right.
this community that's only developed more and more all the time.
That's beautiful.
And now we have a resurgence of a great number of little children, babies and toddlers. For a few years, there really weren't
Right.
very many, or teenagers, but none in between teenagers and nothing.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, there is a very large number of babies and
Well, that's wonderful. So that bodes well for the future, the viability of the community, doesn't
yeah,
it?
yes, it does.
Oh, that's great. All right. Now, you mentioned getting rides into town. Did you ever walk into town, like during the day, or
I remember doing that once.
once? Okay.
And I don't think there was any time of doing that other than that once from this. And I laugh when I say it because we had a dog and he was getting rather elderly. And I took him with me in the morning on a leash. It was a Boston Bulldog. And we decided to walk to town. And when we got there, poor Buddy, he was really having a hard time.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my father, who was here at the time, pulled up in the car and he said, "I thought I better come and rescue Buddy. He
Oh,
would
my
never
God.
make the trip back."
Okay.
So I could make the trip
Right.
back, but Buddy needed to ride home.
Right. That was very thoughtful of your dad.
He was that and a lot more. He was quite a man for all seasons in my eyes, but in other people's eyes as well.
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful. Did you know our other famous walker, John Bennett, who walked everywhere all the time and still does?
Yes.
Did you know John?
I knew of John when we were young. I think a lot back to my teenage years because once I was out of high school, I didn't come here for about 10 years. I worked at a camp,
Right.
a resident camp, and taught swimming. But my high school years, we used to do a lot of, as I say, walking around these dirt roads, Schofield Road and Stage Road, Potash Road, Gailey Hill.
Yeah.
And in the evening, after dinner, we would be walking, and there were groups of local boys who used to walk as well.
Sure.
So sometimes, we'd feel, we could sense that they were behind us,
Right.
or see them actually,
Yeah.
and sense that there were a little bit like pebbles, or I'll say rocks,
Right.
being maybe never hitting us.
Right. Right.
And turned out they were pebbles, really.
Sure.
But many years later, John told me, sitting here visiting with us, he told me that he was one of those boys
Oh, yeah.
that liked to tease the city kids
Okay.
with just letting those little pebbles never come close enough to hit us, but
Right.
give us a little angst.
That's so funny. Like someone would hear that and call that flirting, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe
Flirting,
it was.
teasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. They weren't out to do anything else, but
Right.
it was a little disconcerting at the time, but he said he was one of those
Okay.
things. But anyway, we've been friends throughout. He used to walk down through here lots of times. There was a path here. It's pretty overgrown now.
Oh, okay.
But it comes from Highland Drive.
Oh, okay. Oh, really? All right.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that.
There's a right-of-way, actually, right from there down, but it's just a footpath. And now, as I say, nobody uses it. The kids, when they used to live here and wanted to go there, they would use it a lot.
Okay.
But, and that's within, 15 years or so that they used to use it. But they're grown up now. Their parents live themselves. So.
I was interested in the relationship between the summer kids and what we'll call the town kids. You talked about a swimming arrangement that you would swim during the day, and then they would.
There was no arrangement.
Not an arrangement.
That. No. We didn't really know any of the kids, and I don't think they knew any of us. But I noticed when we were coming up from the beach, then was right across the road from me here.
Oh, okay.
It's the area where the state now has the day use beach.
Sure. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it was perfect. I just walked across the road and down the hill and was at the beach. It was owned by a lumber company, actually. The whole land around the lake was owned by the Fourth Lake Lumber Company. But I used to notice that as we were coming up, some of the, I think mostly boys, I don't remember girls,
right.
were going down swimming. So, there was no arrangement for that.
Oh, no, right.
But,
Yeah, that was the wrong word.
There was really no interaction,
Just
but
a shyness.
I happened to notice that a few times that.
Right.
Or if sometimes we had guests come, somebody come, my dad would stop by with somebody perhaps, and they would want to take a swim like 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. And that's when I noticed that there were a few other young boys there.
Right.
But
You were very descriptive about during the day when you were here that you would leave the house at 9 o'clock and maybe come home at 4:30?
Well, no, come home for lunch.
Come home. Oh, you
Had to have lunch.
Oh, you did come home for lunch. I was going to ask, did you
And
carry
as
a
I
lunch?
say,
No.
my aunt and uncle spoiled me, whenever I wanted to come home, But I did follow a structured time. We'd come back about 12, I guess, have lunch, sit around a little while. I did visit with them. They were sweet. They were like grandparents to me. It was actually my grandmother's sister. And then I would go off to mostly swimming in the afternoon unless it was not swimming weather. And then come back for supper, dinner. We called it supper. And then go out and just stand around or go to one of the houses.
Sure.
And play records in the evening and come back. And oftentimes, even though it didn't split up into couples, but there was quite a group of boys and girls with us, my generation at least. And most of the boys would walk you home because it was a little spooky for me coming around around the bend of the way the road bends right out here.
Okay.
But I did it. I mean,
Yep.
and we always had a flashlight with us because there were no lights in the road.
Okay.
So, but
A lot of
that's
traffic? Was there a lot of car
There was
traffic?
always a lot of traffic.
There was? Okay.
It was called Route 9K,
Right.
and there were a lot of log trucks.
Log trucks? Okay. Right.
And I think it was possibly even a little more narrow than it is now. Cars were smaller, so I think
Sure.
the road has kind of increased through the
Sure.
times. And there were no hard shoulders; it was just dirt.
Okay.
So it was a little precarious for kids walking. But I guess we're careful enough. Thank the Lord, nobody ever got hurt or any problem. But yeah, so we would go out for the day, the morning, and
Right.
then the afternoon, and then the evening.
Right.
But it was just, that's what we did.
Well,
It was simple. It was a simple summer life, but it was meaningful, and we were very close.
a lot of the local kids who are now grown up, adults like John, they talk about playing Explorer in the woods. That was the game. I think it was mostly boys doing that. And you talked about, quote, roaming the woods, and they were exploring in the woods, and so it was just a common activity that kids did. And you just wonder, I mean, do you think that's a practice today for kids to be out like that? You sort of get the feeling it isn't, but I don't know. Hard to
Not
say,
from
huh?
what I hear in the Albany area.
Right, yeah.
Because I still live in that area. I live in Latham,
Mm.
which is Albany, and Albany, Troy, Schenectady. No, they're not roaming the woods.
They're not roaming the woods.
But there are many kids doing all kinds of good things as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, but I don't know. It was just a thing. We were here in the woods.
Right.
And if it wasn't a swimming day, you'd do something. So we would go off, take a lunch, and take a hike and follow the stream,
Now this is definitely an unusual question, but when people do that, like play explorer or roam in the woods, they might get the feeling that they're, an official explorer, and they're creating a kingdom, and my property goes from the rock over a mile over to the tree.
No, we just hiked, really. We just walked.
Okay.
We'd stop at the brook, but, down there off Old Stage Road or one of those roads, there's a little overpass. But, no, we didn't do any of that. I mean, my group didn't do it.
Right, because I think I did some of that when I was your age, and I think I might remember that. Oh, I'm a conquistador here.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
No, I guess we weren't that creative as we did those things. We just took hikes and ate our lunch and.
Sure. Now, as you got older, it seems to be, very, very good times here, very good memories. Did other parts of your life replace or the joy that you felt here, or was it so strong that you're an attachment here that you always were thinking about the place and wanting to be here? How did that go?
That's a very interesting question and good thoughts. I was occupied, as I mentioned, through the 50s at a girls' camp. I was teaching school by then, and but in the summers, I went to this girls' camp and worked as a waterfront director. And for those 10 summers, that was a wonderful experience. And I would have to say, to your question, I didn't really think about this place that much. My parents would come up, but they didn't stay. They would stay for their vacation, and they would stay weekends. I think they even rented the house once or twice, only once or twice, I think twice.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But at one point, my father did say, maybe I should start to think of selling it because, you seem to be not coming.
Mm.
I would come down for a day because it was up in Spoon Lake or Paradox Lake.
Yeah.
I would come down for a day with friends, other counselors. He said, but, because you're not coming. And I said, oh, but I'm not going to go there forever, Dad. I'll come back. Oh, no, I plan to come back. So being the devoted, loving dad that he was, Jim Carr was his name, he said, oh, okay, then. I won't sell it. I just wondered.
Sure.
In 61, I came back, and I've been here ever since.
Okay.
So your question was very pertinent and meaningful. That yes, I was away. I wasn't thinking about Fourth Lake necessarily, but I was always planning to come back, and I picked up my life here again.
Now, so in the winter time now, are you going? Oh, I have to get up there and check up on things. Do you worry about it, or does somebody check up for you, or how does that go?
Well, it's well closed up, and things are taken care of that need to be, and I have developed some very fine workers here through the years. It's gotten a little better feeling now that we have some year-long neighbors there and across the way.
Yeah, that helps,
so,
right?
that it really is a nice feeling to know that there are people living nearby. But we've always used John Bennett. The community has always hired John Bennett to go around the property. Now, John, is ambulatory, isn't a problem, a little concerned now, but
Right.
He's always kind of looked around, made sure doors were locked and
Yes.
windows weren't broken. But it's pretty well protected.
Yeah.
We don't
Actually,
put shutters up anymore and things like that.
you don't. Okay.
No.
Have there been break-ins that you know about ever? Or?
Oh, through the years there have been a few, but
Not
nothing
much?
major. No,
Okay.
no,
All right.
nothing major.
No, I think you mentioned a little bit earlier that, but I wanted to expand on it a little bit. There are people here now who were kids when you were here. They're still friends of yours from over the years, yes?
There's still,
A few?
actually, I think it's down to one other person and
Oh,
from my immediate group growing up here, him and his wife.
oh, okay. One person.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Hank Sobel, Dr. Henry Sobel, and they live here year round. But his
Okay.
children come.
They do.
His daughter has a place here as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but he is the only one, and there have been a few up until the later years. Yeah.
Do you have some regular contact with that person?
Well, today with the internet, it's easier too. But
Okay. And you did say you do see a lot of kids here now. After a time when you hadn't been seeing them, now you are seeing children
well,
here.
there's a lot of little children.
Little
now.
little kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because some of the ones that have grown up in the past, 20 years or so, have their own families now, and they're coming, they're purchasing or moving into the family home, or
Great. That's good to hear. Now, were there? You may be too young for this, but I mean, at the
I'm
time.
probably too young for anything, John.
No, I mean at the time, but to have noticed. But were there post-World War II changes that happened to the community? Did you see more people coming, or how did that work out?
Well, that's another interesting question that I wouldn't have thought of. During the war, I was here. There were some places that didn't open, I believe, a few houses, a couple, because the people didn't use their cars. They didn't have gasoline or couldn't get tires. We did come. My father, being in the automobile business,
Right.
perhaps had a little bit more access to things like that.
Yeah.
But we did come, and we didn't come as far as they would anyway, because just 50 miles.
Yeah.
But at the end of the war, I remember when it was, the hitching post was a booming place the day that the war ended.
Is that right?
Cars were parked on both sides. The place was, and my parents went down. I didn't go. I was too young. And they went down and just socialized a little bit with whoever was at the hitching post from
Sure.
wherever. And that was, I remember that. But then I think in reference to that question from you, there was a great additional surge in the 50s, and I think that probably was a result of families, young families, and people who had been in the service coming back. So I would think the fact that many more of the current families came in the 50s
Okay.
was tied into the end of the war and
Yep.
all of the things that happened after that.
Right. There was a post-war economic
Absolutely.
boom, so to speak, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
So I think there's probably a connection to that. But yes, it was not significantly noticeable difference during the war, except that people didn't have gas and things to. But I still lived here all through the war.
You did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my father thought having these grand uncle and aunt here, they didn't have any children, and they had been very good to my mother growing up. So I think he was happy that I was here. Not that it wasn't safe in the city for me as a little girl, but he knew I had a much better
Yeah.
time here and swimming and things that he liked and valued.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he and my mother were happy that I was here, and they would come up weekends.
Oh, okay, right. Do you spend a lot of time now remembering? Do you spend a lot of time being in the past, thinking about the past now, or is it? Are you a kind of no? I live in the present moment. What kind of person are you around that kind of issue?
I guess I'll say that's a glass half full and a glass half empty. I live in the present. I'm very active. Thankfully, I've been very fortunate with good health, and continue to have good experiences, and a lot of people in my life that I, both a little bit of relatives, but mostly good friends. But I also enjoy remembering many of the things from my life. So I do think back, but not in a maudlin way, in a positive way, in a thankful way, in a smiling way, that I cherish many of these memories, which is probably why I would even talk to you about them, and why perhaps Patricia mentioned me, because I do look back with great fondness and appreciation for my life thus far, and yet I'm very much into today.
Very nice. I didn't really ask, but what did you do for a career? Where did you go to college, and what did you do for making a living? We should probably know that.
All right, it's a good life. It's not an exciting one, but it worked for me.
Yeah.
I went to a private Catholic high school, grammar school and high school in Cohoes. I went to the College of St. Rose in Albany, which was all girls at that time. It became co-ed in the 70s, but it was all girls. And I lived on campus, was very much involved, and was a music major. So I participated in many of the music organizations, the Glee Club and things, and the theater and so forth. So when I graduated, I was a public school music teacher for K through 8th grade, and then had a chorus, and also for a number of years I was a choir director at a Catholic church.
Wow.
On weekends.
Okay, what church?
St. Bernard's Catholic Church in
Cohoes.
Cohoes,
Sure, yeah.
which is closed now.
Is it? That was connected to Keavney High School.
Exactly.
Right across the street.
Keavney was the school that was of the,
Father
And my
Mulcahy?
parents went to that school.
Did they?
But not the building. I mean, it was a newer building.
Right. That was Father Mulqueen? Bishop?
He was there later on.
Later
he wasn't
on,
there
yeah.
when I was in school.
Right. All right, so that's definitely...
Yeah, I can see you're a local Albany area person as
Sure.
well. So.
Sure. So that was obviously your dad's influence on your career, basically music teacher.
His family was very musically oriented, and he played violin. His sister played piano. But I did leave music teaching after 10 years. Although I did a lot of community theater, I was very much involved in Latham and community theater for years. I taught in Troy, but I decided to make a career change in a sense. Stayed in education, but became a guidance counselor. So I had taken a year off and gone to grad school again.
What brought you to that decision? To go from music to guidance counselor?
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of things in my life, I think, that just tied in, and I decided that, I had worked at this camp where it was more of a guidance type of work in a way, in addition. But things happened, and I decided to do that. I loved music, but I decided I'd rather use it for my own avocation instead of, the structure of teaching.
Sure.
So I just made that change, but continued on with music groups, choral society in Albany,
Oh, which one?
Capitol Hill Choral Society.
Oh, the Messiah.
Right.
Did you perform the Messiah?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
for many years.
We used to go to see it. Did you
Yes,
know
I
John DuPont?
I knew the name.
Yeah, he was part of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. We used to go to that performance, and there you were.
I was there for many years, and then I did a lot of solo work as well.
Well, how do you mean? What
Well, I
solo work?
sang in so other smaller choruses. I would be asked to be a soloist.
Oh,
You know, not of the same polish as Capitol Hill,
uh-huh.
but then and I sang at weddings and
Oh,
yeah.
oh.
And I was in community theater as well. So.
Yeah, in what capacity?
Well, I sometimes was the lead.
Actor. And
Yeah, they were musicals. They were always musicals.
okay, for
Like Camelot and Sound of Music and earlier Gilbert and Sullivan.
oh my, and okay, and are there any recordings of you in that doing that or?
Well, there were, but I don't. They were just my own things.
Sure, but you were in Camelot. We just saw Oklahoma last year.
Oh,
Did you ever do Oklahoma?
no.
Okay, we loved it. Anyway, so
Yes.
a real varied artistic career.
Well, that's just what I'm saying. I've had a lot of good experiences that
Yeah,
I cherish, but, move on.
sure. Have you done a lot of traveling? Have you been out of the country or?
Yes. None of this, of course, pertains so much to the Adirondacks.
Oh, okay.
I've taken trips out of the country. I spent a summer in Europe many, many years ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That doesn't really pertain to what. But where did you do your graduate work for your master's?
Well, I have one from College of St. Rose, a master's, and then I have one from Siena College,
Oh.
and I did additional work up at the University of Maine in Orono,
Oh. Oh.
postgraduate.
Postgraduate. Oh, okay. Well, we love Maine. Now, this might be a final question.
All right.
Are you a person who compares then and now, and finds the now, the present time,
Yeah, well, I think we kind of covered that.
disappointing, or does the present time seem as good as the past?
Well, I think depending on the day of the week that you ask that question, and especially at this year following the past year and a half,
Yeah.
I think it's a mixed bag. Again, it's a half glass full or half empty. You can always find things, but if you dwell on the negative, you're never going to see the positive. So it's what it is. We try to work our way through it and around it, right? As human beings in the world today,
Absolutely.
we can say what might have been or used to be, but to dwell on that is to negate your life, I think.
Very, yeah, good
So-
point. That's good. Well said, and a good point. Now, do you have a feeling for the economic well-being of Luzerne when you were younger, as opposed to now? Did it seem busier then? Was it, or maybe you didn't think about it? Were there a lot of stores open, people on the street, and all that, or?
I don't recall any great. I mean, we didn't spend a lot of time down in the village.
Okay,
You know,
right.
we went for ice cream, we went to the movies, and went to the market. But, I didn't have a sense of too much that was going on, I guess, down there. But I think probably there are things today that are more developed, more active. But I don't know. That's that's a difficult question for me because I don't feel that I have the experience from either time to really say.
Right. Okay, well, I want to thank you for participating. Was there, I should ask, was there something that you wanted to address or cover that we haven't?
Well, I think your questions pretty much really covered a great number of thoughts that I would have about my life here for spending summers for 80 9 years.
Yeah, that is remarkable. I mean, it's just it's an amazing.
Starting out as a very little baby.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm gonna.
No, I was just going to do something.
Okay.
Starting out as a, where do I do this? As a very little baby, I don't know if that's going to forward, but there's Jim Carr, Margaret Carr, and Barbara Carr, or as you call us, automobile.
The automobile family.
And that
There
was
you
my
are.
first. That was my first trip to Fourth Lake in September of 1932.
Oh, okay.
You'll notice my mother has a fur piece on her coat in September.
Let me see. Can you hold it up, like,
I don't know.
oh, that way? There. Oh, you are looking straight at the camera. Right at it. That's very nice.
Yeah, always looking for the camera.
Oh, that's right. You became an actress.
So, are we finishing up here?
Yes, we are.
It's so nice to meet you, John, and I enjoyed the
yeah.
questions you posed to me.
Good.
Tried to answer them the best I could.
You did great.
And it's a place I love.
Excellent, and that definitely comes across. All right. Well, we want to thank you, and so you'll be able to see it online, so to speak, on YouTube or.
I'll probably wince a few times,
Well,
but that's all right.
You were fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.